here to talk about the future of video. And my name is Jess Clifton. I'm from S4 Capital, formerly had a consultancy that was recently acquired into S4. And before that, I was the US head of digital for Edelman. So I obviously understand the digital marketing space pretty well. And I'd like to hand it over to Bridget to introduce herself and then have Vincent. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Bridget Baker, and I spent most of my career building cable assets for NBCUniversal when it was a division of General Electric and later Comcast, which was over 20 years. And it was fantastic, starting with CNBC being the first asset we launched in-house and grew to be a giant portfolio of cable networks and regional sports networks and some of Comcast assets when they purchased us in 2011. And later, well, two sections, 2011 and 2013. And it was that year that I stepped down and started an independent consultancy and have served on the public board of a cable company in my home state of Alaska until it was sold to Liberty Broadband. And currently watching the whole video explosion from my seat on the board of Live Media, which is interesting, and a couple of other things.
Awesome. Vincent?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vincent. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Fireworks. So we, as a business, raised about 55 million Series A, and the mission is to bring the TikTok, Snapchat, the social experience to all the publishers and to all the websites. So that's what we're doing. And before that, I built a business called Everstream. We raised over 100 millions and got acquired by ZoomInfo. And I started my career with JP Morgan as an investment banker until I shifted to being an entrepreneur. Very nice to meet with all of you.
Great. So great to have you guys. And I know we're talking about the future of video, but when we did a little prep call yesterday, we're really honing in on short form videos. And, we believe collectively and through the industry that short form videos are really not just the future of social media, but the future of web experience. In fact, about 56% of videos created by businesses today are 2 minutes or less. And the audiences are responding to this. 53% of videos that are 90 seconds or less are watched to completion. That means over 50% of people who are watching videos that are 90 seconds or less are actually completing them, which is great given our attention spans are now 7 seconds, which is less than a goldfish. But when you compare that to videos that are 30 minutes or more, you're only getting about 10% completion. So if you want to watch videos, obviously shorter is better. And if you want people to engage with your videos, same principle. So Vincent has some really cool technology that he's been working on, and Bridget has some great insights. I'm going to kick it over to Vincent first to just talk a little bit about some perspective on the evolution of content consumption and how short form videos are really playing a role in the way consumers are consuming content with brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jess. So by the way, for better illustration, is it okay that I can share my screen to show it to everyone?
I think we're going to just keep it conversation today, if you don't mind, because we don't know technically. But if you could just maybe talk about the digitization that's happening and maybe the comparison of some of the social platforms versus the publisher side opportunity, that would be awesome.
Yes. So I'm sure everybody now knows a lot about short videos and all of those. What we find is if you look at TikTok and Instagrams and Snaps, 70% of the content people are consuming are already in a short video format, which is mobile first, tappable, swipeable, and even shoppable to a certain extent. So that's actually what, on the mobile side, everybody is seeing. But what we find is when you look at the publisher side with all the website, there are 350 million live website right now with about 250 billion traffic. But when you look at that part of the world, what we find astonishingly, 0% of the content was delivered in the modern day short form video content. It was still run mostly text, images, and even when a lot of people talk about video, but it was very traditional long form video. I think Jesse talked about it, people's attention span on long form on Netflix and YouTube, absolutely. But when people go to a website, they just wanted to get information and leave. When attention span is very short, the traditional like Vimeo streaming a 2-hour long on a web page is no longer relevant. That's why what we are seeing the trends of the video goings and the content consumption is, people slowly to expect the same content experience from Instagram and TikTok to their favorite publishers. They wanted to see some of that happening. Anyway, so that's kind of the evolution, right? And of course, on Firework side, we see that as well. That's why we built the infrastructure to help them to make it happen, to turning every single publisher, right, that look like a TikTok, to get a publisher into a Snapchat. That's kind of what we're doing.
That's very, very cool. And, I think there's something interesting you mentioned yesterday, Vincent, just to kind of pick up on this, that, brands are obviously creating content on every platform, but they're not maximizing that content on their website. And there's a sunk investment, obviously, when you're creating content, social platform side versus owned content side. So I'd love to just get your perspective on that. And I'd love, Bridget, for you to just jump in and weigh in too.
Yes, so I'll just add one more point. So the one thing that, when we look at a publisher, right? So initially they all start with physical paper, they go to digital, and when social media comes in, they're starting to put content onto social media. But what's happening behind the scene is, while they're putting all of their content to social media, and they're starting to lose their own user experience, they're actually starting to lose their ownership to the users, right? So in the end of the day, where a lot of people seeing as publisher are having a tough time because they ended up being a few Instagram accounts, right? That's why what we are seeing about, whether it's Vice, whether it's BuzzFeed, where they want to push for IPOs, right? From a capital market perspective, you're seeing their valuation constantly raising down, round, and cut. Why? Because the capital markets are viewing that there's no differentiation asset anymore, because you don't own any user. Yeah, you have some big Instagram accounts, but that's it. And the other thing, what a lot of the media firm didn't realize is, originally you're only competing with 100 publisher, right? But when you're starting to enter the social medias, you're starting to compete with 20 million Instagram or TikTok teenager girls, who actually is a little bit better about getting followers. Now, the same thing for brands is the same thing, right? Originally, people think about putting content into Instagram or Amazon. But now what's happened is, for example, Nike 3 years ago decided not to put things onto Amazon. Everything is on their own property. Disney, for example, decided to bring everything in-house to their O&O, not putting things onto social anymore. Because finally, I think the forward-looking media and brands starting to realize is, social media was not built for brands, and social media is built for social. It's for people to follow people, right? The website, their O&O property, is the way to really build a connection to the user. That's, I think, a trend starting to happen. I don't know, Bridget, what do you think about kind of that trend happening right away?
Well, there's many different directions to go with that input, but I think one of the key, we can call it an evolution since 2005, when YouTube began and patented youtube.com. The phenomenon from the big media companies, and what, Vincent, you referred to maybe as publishers, was the belief then that there would be no, the famous expression was cats on skateboards, I think, or scat, that no one would actually be interested in what was termed at the time as user-generated content. And if you want to talk about the phenomenon of getting to where we are today with TikTok, for instance, or Vine or Vimeo, or these, is that's fundamentally all we're looking at is user-generated content. So I think in the context of looking at the arc of, if you want to start, even in my mind, as late as 2005, but at the beginning of what you might say was online aggregated video, that's been the real phenomenon, is that the user part of this, the user generated part of this, is what has become dominant. And I don't think you could have convinced anybody in a position of power or any capitalized company at the time that was producing high quality video. Certainly, these are the companies that basically launched together to form Hulu, or CBS did their own online venture, would have believed that, user generated is the way it would end up today.
I think that's a really profound insight. And, what's interesting is brands don't even realize this, but they are actually now in the space of competing with that UGC. To your point, Vincent, a brand can come onto Instagram and get, hundreds of thousands of followers because it's a popular brand. But at the end of the day, it's not going to hold its weight next to that, 20-year-old TikTok influencer who has millions and millions of followers. And so I think the indication that we're seeing here is, yes, short form video is great. it doesn't hurt to be on social platforms, but is that really the right place to convey your message and sell your story? Bridget, I think it'd be interesting, you have obviously a lot of background in like managing IP. And so as brands start to distribute their IP on these social channels, they have no ownership of it anymore. So in terms of the trend line, do you think that they're going to start to pull back and go more owned channel?
Well, you're seeing it already. If we back up even just a little bit, not even a year, we can point to three I can think of off the top of my head, again, out of the big brand global media, publicly traded enterprises who have launched their own streaming services. And the three I'm thinking of right off the top, of course, are Disney Plus, Peacock from NBC, Comcast, and Discovery Plus, and actually 4, Paramount Plus. And you've got all of these doing exactly what you just said, Jess, which is the attempt to say, and it's not as if I really can speak to the issue going back again to the 07, 08, 05 window. It isn't as if a company like NBCUniversal, and they had just become the Universal part of NBC. We acquired Universal, that deal closed in the late summer 2004. So by 5 and 6, we were just then a joint company. But it wasn't as if no one was already thinking about proprietary IP. The entire discussion about the concept that eventually created Hulu began as an idea of fighting piracy. So for those who might remember, a Saturday Night Live skit called Lazy Sunday was, put on YouTube, and this caused a furor because this was seen as theft, piracy, taking copyrighted content and putting it on a platform that had no connection to the creators, to Saturday Night Live, to NBC, to Broadway productions, to anything. So that idea that we're going to fight piracy is what really started the discussions about, well, maybe if they're going to do this, they, meaning the world at large, those people on the World Wide Web, we're going to take our content and put it somewhere, then by God, millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars are put into the production of this kind of internet, intellectual property. So creating a legal online destination with high quality video. It isn't as if NBC alone launched Hulu. NBC went around to other programming companies at the time, Viacom, Fox, CBS, all the big guys. Fox ended up being our partner, along with an equity company. And that's how Hulu launched. But Time Warner Cable at the time, Disney at the time, they were not involved. So it isn't as if no one was thinking about that back then. But I think the again, we can call it a revolution or the evolution of where this has gone is really, it's almost a whole other panel on kind of revenue and how the focus of an established media company that's publicly traded in the markets is focused on revenue results and how they get their revenue versus other companies.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
It's such a fascinating story. I feel like you need to write a book about that. I would read it twice. It's so interesting. It's just really, it's the democratization of content and the fight over ownership and public domain. And, there's so much there. And I think, connecting that back then to brands, like why would you be distributing your content so futilely and making all of this investment when you have no ultimate ownership of it and no way to reconcile how it's actually driving revenue back to your business? So I'll come back to that in a second, but Vincent, I wanted to ask you, with the world being locked down, obviously consumers are consuming more content than ever. Anecdotally, I'll tell you, like the TikTok hashtag challenge went from $130,000 in March of 2020 to $350,000 in October of 2020, based on the explosive growth of TikTok, which I found to be very interesting. So I think, as things start to come back in the world, people maybe distance themselves a little bit more from mobile and come back into the real world. I anticipate live video is going to have a significant role. What are your predictions on how live experiences are going to evolve based on what we've just gone through in the last year?
Yes, so I think the live experience definitely seeing an upward trend. We're seeing the data ourselves using our systems. And it all comes from, if you look at the emerging market on China and all the other places where they're taking live experience into the new level, right? It's go beyond just a live concert and live like a Twitch game show. They're starting to do live stream for e-commerce and a lot of those, right? Now we're slowly starting to see the North America, the developed country part of the world starting to adopt it. In particular now with the 4G and 5G starting to come into play, the telcos is all pushing very heavily on the live experience as well. So yeah, definitely we're seeing now brands. We're starting to talk to a lot of brands, starting to see they want to jump on into the live, right? And also they wanted to do it, I think, as Jess and Bridget talk about, is owning their own experience, right? Not only just owning the content, also owning the user. While you are doing a live on YouTube and all the other, guess what? It's YouTube user, it's TikTok's user, right? It's is it really your user, right? And also when you are doing things on Amazon, while you are showcasing your product, but Amazon said, well, before you make a purchase, by the way, here's 10 other product, Mr. Consumer, you should take a look. Or, hey, when I'm doing a live on YouTube, YouTube will say, Mr. User, why are you enjoying this? But hold on. There's 10 other people that are doing maybe even more exciting live stream. Go take a look at theirs. So that really leave. But who ultimately created content is the media firm, is the brand. They're creating the content, but ironically, they're not owning the experience. They're not owning even the users. Yeah. That's why you're starting to see more and more people shifting to their own O&O now. So
I love that. Bridget, do you have anything to add?
Just, I think when we bring it back to the cash and the money.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that you're going to get credit in any way, and that's, I mean, again, it's the way you can look at these social platforms that are really the dominant live, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, but they're fractions of what in the day a media company could get in value from the viewer that was watching their, signal, if that's what, you want to say, or their content. And so it's really a discussion of, you've got to keep up with the times, obviously. I mean, everyone's shifting, but the economics and the business model is just changed dramatically.
Yeah, that's great. I think so. What we're making here is really the case for brand ownership, right? And bringing it back to the money, as you say, Bridget, I love that. So then, what does the model look like? What are your predictions for how brands are going to take the power back and really own and control their content and distribute that content in a way that still gets the same level of eyeballs as if they were to put it on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram?
I could hit that first a little bit and bring it to the Live by Live, platform, because I think, again, I was reflecting on this last night. I remember years and years ago reading, because again, by age, you might say, or just where I was in my career at the time, YouTube was such an unattractive platform, I'd say. And for those who, it still is. I mean, for those who remember logging onto Hulu for the first time, major chops to Jason Kyler and the team that created that interface. That was one of the goals, to create this beautiful user interface with legal video premium. We use that word, premium video content. And they did it with minimal ad interruptions and just a gorgeous user experience. So you're right, Jess. And YouTube is still, this kind of unattractive platform. But I remember reading or absorbing way back then, because I can think of crazy examples where I would want to just maybe show my kids a musician from the old days, and I would try to just Google their name. And instead I would get 400 just guys in their own garages singing that song. And I couldn't find it. And it just was obnoxious. So the idea that things were not going to stay in this giant YouTube environment, but that aficionados and people who had real passions were going to siphon off their own. That's what was going to happen as the years unfolded, is people would go to their own websites for this type of thing. And in a way, I think Live by Live is a super interesting platform defining that exact prediction back then, which is that if you're interested in music and you're interested in musicians and you want to see live content or on-demand content, there is a place to go that has just that. And you get to be encapsulated and immersed into this experience, whether you're fan or a super fan, you get to be in this environment and not distracted by all the garage band players that you do not want to listen to. So you can pull that into a million different hobbies, photography, gardening. And I think that phenomenon going forward is then, putting aside economics for a second, is just how it will evolve into getting people to where they want to be. And so to Vincent's company, which is starting, I can see how bringing home those experiences to your own brand page would be so attractive to me, I believe, because why should it sit on Instagram? You don't own Instagram. I mean, why wouldn't you want your customers where you are?
Yep. Where you can sell your products seamlessly.
And hold that. If that's what advertisers, and that's so far what they're giving businesses credit for, that stickiness, how long does the subscriber stay there? How many click-throughs? If that's going to be our metric that we're going to measure, why should that sit on Amazon, even Apple, YouTube? Why? I mean, just let it sit on the vendor's website.
That's right.
So, and also, Bridget, to add two more examples to everyone. So if you look at ESPN, so Disney was also, a forward thinking. They already realized exactly what Bridget has been saying. Why do I put all my proprietary IP and content onto social? Why don't I do it ourselves? So today, if you visit ESPN or download ESPN app, what you find is they're actually bringing the Snapchat. They build their own version of Snapchat and TikTok onto their own website and app. And then when it comes to monetization, because this is what Bridget has been honing hard all the time. So now see what they did. Now all the ad sales teams in ESPN, right? Instead of just waiting for Snapchat send you a check, you have no control. You don't know what the check gonna look like. You're living at the mercy of Snap and YouTube's algorithm. But now they're selling tons of inventory on their own property.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going.
Plus, they got to change. Not to interrupt Vincent, but I think also that being at the mercy, but also at the just whim of whenever they wanted to change their metric of what they had decided they wanted to pay for. What did they want to pay for? They were in full control, or are in full control, of how the percentage split works, what they want to measure, how they're going to pay. And they have just I believe, become these behemoths of, where you're slicing and dicing this content that, in fact, in order to create it, just took huge dollars and time and resources and creativity.
Yeah. And there's one more, which is data, right? So let's say you have 200 million people viewing your content on YouTube. Now you go to, hey, YouTube, could you send me those data? Because I wanted to inject that into my DMP, because when cookies going away, all I have is my first party data. Can I get that? The answer is absolutely no. It's our YouTube data is not yours. Even though, thank you very much, you give all the content to me for free, but it's my user, right? So, right, that's why ESPN saw that. They said, no, I want to see what my users are watching so that I can dissect more to help my advertisers onto that. So the trend is happening. The other example you take a look at is called GetGlobal. GetGlobal is the biggest publisher media company in Brazil. About a year ago, social media has approached GetGlobal like TikTok and says, hey, I'm going to pay you money. Could you put all your proprietary shows, all of that onto my social media? So GetGlobal come back to them to say, no, here's why. We have a website. Our website traffic is much bigger than social media. We have a TV. Our TV actually still people watch television, right? I know there's a much better experience on Snap and TikTok, but I'm just going to build this experience on my own website, right? So they actually choose Firework to build the experience for their own website, but it's their domain, their brand, right? Now they're going out to say, hey guys, we are global. We launched the global short video. If you want to watch it, visit global.com.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And that was going to be just a follow-on question I had for you that you just provoked. But brands have invested so much into building presence on these social platforms. So what is your advice for them on how they kind of walk it back and start to make that same investment on their websites to encourage more audience to come to them? And how do they pull people in? Any strategies you can share?
Yes. So maybe I'll take a shot, and Bridget, I'll leave you because you're the expert for brands and on the media side. So what we find is social media is still very valid, in particular for top of the funnel, if the brand know how to get followers. Most of the brand don't, but there's still some very good brands that knows how to bring followers. But for the people that don't know how to bring followers, what they mostly doing is basically they're buying traffic from Google, is what they call arbitrage, right? $1 click onto their website, right? And then they're able to sell for $3 to $5. That's kind of the entire business.
Mhm.
So what we normally recommend is about on their own website, right? So first use a short video infrastructure vendor, right? Again, I'm not trying to be biased, but this is what Firework did. They installed the Firework to turn their website into TikTok. But content creation is actually much harder. But I'll leave the section to Bridget on the content creations about how to really create branded content to increase their conversion. But we definitely see from our data that brands, those e-commerce brands, use Shopify as your CMS, use Firework as a short video infrastructure.
Mhm.
I've seen about 3 times to 5 times increase in conversion when they're using short video to showcase. They're very happy about this, right? Then anyway,
That's great.
I would say that what all of us can acknowledge what we have seen recently, which is the phenomenon on Instagram of being able to shop. I mean, I don't think a couple of years ago, in my experience, it was maybe happening, but not as prevalent as it is right now. I mean, you cannot get through one scroll without, first of all, they now put their own sponsored ads in there, of course. And some of those are video, to Vincent's point, and maybe shoppable right there. But even the, what do we want to call them? The users of Instagram, they're all doing shopping and promoting.
Mhm.
And with the advent of Reels on Instagram, and I'm more familiar with Instagram than Snap, maybe that was happening there as well. But that certainly is something going on. So I think to take it back a couple of steps, I'm actually not an expert at all to talk about, really, I was not on the content creative side, but I understand the money that was invested in content creation. And I think, again, it's a phenomenon, I'll go back 10 years, even 8, where if you took the big 4, let's call them ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, the executives sitting at the top floors of those huge buildings in Midtown Manhattan were obsessed with sort of what is our competition, trying to understand. It used to be that they believed that their competition was each other. NBC maybe had the rights to the NFL Thursday night game that CBS did not have, nor did ABC or Fox. NBC has the Olympics. No one else has those. They divided among themselves who's got the Grammys, who's got the Oscars, who's, sort of big, marquee events, and they trade off. And that business has a lot to do with rights back to IP and how that stuff is negotiated. So when you look today, I think, and I'm parenting 3 Generation Zs, these are humans that never turn on a television. That's what I say to everyone. They don't turn on the TV. They, well, even more so now, look at their phones, but it used to be they would turn on the computer. They might turn on the big screen for a gaming situation, but the idea of who is your competition, which takes us all back to revenue and profitability, the whole business model, it's impossible sort of to know, because I could respond to Vincent by saying, oh yes, let me pontificate about how a network like USA could develop shows such as Suits, Royal Pains, White Collar. How did that happen? How much money did they spend per ep? What was going on? How do we recoup it through subscriber fees, advertising? We can talk all about that. But the truth is that the Generation Zs I witness in my own roof, under my own roof here, if we're going to try to analyze who the competition to those USA shows is, it's the YouTube videos. I mean, my daughter is watching the person who does the makeup, or 2 or 3 of the makeup influencers on YouTube. And my son is a big F1 fan. So he's all over Instagram and F1. And they're in these, what I would call maybe silos of specific interests. They're rock climbers. They love to follow the people doing the rock climbing. And it's not branded creative content that is the competition to branded creative content. The competition to branded creative, premium, highly produced content is actually what we were talking about at the beginning. It's the user generated or the super fan interests that are going to draw my son to the F1 website or draw my daughter to the rock climbing websites or their Instagram accounts.
Interesting. Wow. I see a whole brand deal universe happening right now before my eyes in such a compelling way, right? Because if you can figure out how brands can connect into those experiences of that hyper-focused audience that you're talking about, Bridget, and then pull people into their brand to then monetize their content and their materials and goods that have a connection there, that's where the power is. For example, if Sephora has some sort of partnership with those makeup influencers and your daughter's exposed to them using Sephora products, she clicks on the Sephora website, goes and sees that makeup influencer making content on Sephora's website. She can click the video and buy all the products that she's using. That's like the money shot right there, it seems.
That's it. And what you have, I think, and this is not denigrating anyone. It really isn't. It's just we're trying to take a Polaroid snapshot in time right now on this particular panel to discuss what is happening. But think about it. If you're the ad agencies that dominate Midtown Manhattan are middlemen. So if you're the young ad buyer at one of the giant agencies sitting there and you're chasing after Sephora dollars on behalf of matching NBC's primetime schedule to a Sephora check, you want revenue, Sephora revenue. Mm-hmm. The savvy people at really, I would say that they're housed at Sephora are much more reticent today. They would fall all over themselves 10 years ago to meet with one of these agencies that was representing one of the big broadcast brands. But today, a savvy Sephora brand person is a little bit kind of, I've got this other thing going on. It's much more integrative. It's much more immersive. It's much more focused, curated, whatever they're not so much about broad, I'm not sure where it's going. If it's on NBC at 9:30 on a Thursday night, I don't know who's watching. I don't have enough data. Back to Vincent's point. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Vincent, do you have anything you want to add there in terms of like the model that you guys are building and the predictions you see as it relates to that connection between that 20-year-old maker on TikTok and how brands can ultimately leverage that to connect their story?
Yes, so absolutely. So I think one thing that to follow up what Bridget is saying, very interesting, is if everybody were just competing on the arena of social media, it's very unfair competition for the brands because they're using those PGC content to compete with all the UGC content. And guess what? Who wins? It was the cat video playing a piano that wins, not the PGC content, because they're in the wrong place. That's why there's so many brands. Every day, what I talk to them is about. Yes, social can give you some traffic, right? It's almost like people feed you some sweets and candies, but don't get addicted to them. If you get addicted to it, right, you're going to end up being a social media account with nothing left to you, whether you're a brand, whether you're a media. Some people go too far to social, right? Yeah. So that's actually the thing, just to tag along to what Bridget has been doing. But coming back to it is about more, it's in particular the Sephora brand. That's a great example. Now, COVID. Originally, when human beings buy product, you're facing another people. You want to see in particular the brands and products that they're selling experience. It's not a standardized utility product. Standardized utility product, Amazon it is. That's still the way. But if you're selling a non-utility product, you're selling a cosmetic brand, you're selling a shirt, you're selling a lifestyle, your website is the place to make the sales. And also another very interesting thing. What's the difference? A lot of people say, well, short video is just long form video making short. That was not right at all, right? Because short video is taken by, right? And we look at Quibi. Quibi, it have the mindset, okay, short video, I got it. I know how to do Hollywood movie. Let me make it short. That's it. We see the result, right? So the fundamental difference between short video and long form is should use a red camera facing outward. Short form is using your mobile phone facing yourself. What's the difference? When you are facing yourself, you are showing you in a very authentic way to your audience. The authenticity is lacking in every single content creation in my mind, right? It's too much stage, in particular for the social born generation. Because for social-born generation, the reason why they hate advertising is because this is so fake, this is so staged. Doesn't mean they cannot be influenced. They actually are much more easily influenced, right? That's why the word influencer comes in. They're much more easily influenced. But what they are looking at a brand when you market to the young audience is authenticity. Just show what you really are, right? Don't spend $3 million with an agency to do those high fly creative and then put it on the Super Bowl, right? Just face your camera, just to say it out. Hey, here's my name. I'm selling these shoes. Take a look, right? Let me wear it for you. You click buy and everything on your website. That's in my mind and how people do it, right? You don't need to hire a celebrity because it's expensive, right? It's because you're not leveraging social too much. Just hire someone that even your own sales assistant, face the camera, show yourself. It's actually, what we've seen the data is authenticity actually drives a much higher buying intent because people feel that's real. It's actually going to increase about 80% of buying intent when you show authenticity into it.
Yeah. And that's a new.
It's fair to say also the skepticism of this generation that we're talking about, even if you do go out and hire a celebrity, they're skeptical enough to say, well, she's getting paid by the brand, they dismiss it almost immediately too.
They do. I do think, it's taken a while for brands to get comfortable with that because they do come from these worlds of making $500,000 million television spots that are 30s that they'll give to an agency to cut down to a 15 or 10, and they'll put that same replication on social, but it's polished and it's beautiful and they feel comfortable with it. I think moving into this raw, mobile first, not edited type of environment has actually really exploded mostly in the last year with COVID, with all of the creators, with the explosion of TikTok adoption. So I think that that's a really interesting observation to consider, especially for big global brands, that not everything needs to be polished. And in fact, the more polished it is, the more skeptical it could be received if you're talking to a younger audience. So Bridget, question for you. We've seen so many innovations happening in video. We've seen innovations happening in audio. We've seen linear to online OTT, VOD to SVOD to live streaming. So can you share your predictions on how traditional entertainment companies will pivot to keep audiences engaged?
I can try. I think I say that with real, genuine belief that it's hard because you have to remember the scale of these corporations. They're just enormous if you think about traditional media companies. And in that vein, I would say there's a lot to admire about how fast they do actually attempt, to move. They're hugely powerful and then have just astonishing success. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't drop jaw at the Disney Plus subscription numbers.
Right.
And also the money, obviously, that they can invest in these. But I bring that up because that's one way they're pivoting already, right? So you see that, again, just take the arc of Hulu, which we kept in a beta test until the Super Bowl of 2008, when the sort of then famous, the Alec Baldwin ad came out with the octopus that a lot of people watched, but it was to talk about the launch of Hulu. And again, that was a partnership. So we had Fox content on the platform along with NBC. This was all broadcast content, at least for our company. The cable content was definitely kept, behind the wall because it was a subscription. In order to get those cable networks shows, you were subscribing to a cable operator. So we couldn't just pull that out and put it on Hulu, which at the time was not a subscription service. It had advertising and was a free service. But look at the evolution of that, even since 2008 till now. So you don't have that asset happens to be owned by Disney now. So that's where the product is going to be, Disney and the Fox content, since they acquired Fox. But as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, in the call, we have all these big media companies doing their own, what they call OTT, over the top or online subscription, or free and subscription service. So there's a pivot. I think that they wrestle probably, daily with the advent of how to interact with the other big technology and platform companies, whether that be Apple, iTunes, Google, YouTube, TikTok, all of it, they're navigating how to do that, because the other phenomenon that is really challenging at the big companies is the idea that, the talent also is not truly theirs. I mean, there's a middleman in the talent relationship as well, called the agent and the manager. And so that's a whole layer of interaction too. And the reason that becomes material is, let's say they want to take one of their very big stars outside of news. I mean, I'm taking out the Today Show or the things that come under NBC News, but I'm talking about primetime dramas like Law and Order franchise or some of the big things. And of course, I quickly pivot to NBC shows because those are the ones I know the best. They may want to create very sticky fan engagement, which is sort of what we're talking about when we're talking about branding and the social platforms. But perhaps that particular star, has a different passion or charitable effort or something, or somewhere else that they devote their likeness, name, support, etc. And they don't really want to, dilute it with doing something on behalf of NBCUniversal, Comcast. So you have that whole challenge with them too. So I think where they end up going is having to really scramble on both sides, to try to figure out which of their top recognized talent and programs can be further expanded to move into maybe the audio world with podcasting, a direct to consumer relationship with an online streaming service, or strategic partnerships with things like other big companies that are adjacent. We could talk for hours about just the Olympics and how NBCUniversal has worked on that franchise since our earliest days when I was there, when we were the first. We introduced this idea that one broadcaster would have multiple games, and that started in the year 2000 with the Sydney Summer Games. And NBCUniversal has never lost the Olympics since, in a bidding situation, and they own the rights through 2028 or something. So just that franchise, which is one of their many, and how do they make that more relevant? We all heard, or I definitely noted a week or so ago, that they announced that the Super Bowl is going to be during the Olympics in coming up next year, 2022, in the Winter Games.
Right.
Well, that would never have happened. That would never have happened even 1 year ago. Back to my point of those four big, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, just kind of a handshake decorum between them. You would never directly schedule against the other guy, something that big. And here we go. I don't even know who has the Super Bowl rights for 22, but apparently they've scheduled them during the games, which is radical. If you're me and you've lived through these other times, you're sort of going, So I think how they pivot is in all these many ways of trying to decipher, and they're trying to move really fast. The great news is they have all the scale and capital and really such big scale still, to do that.
That's amazing. Thank you. Vincent, do you have anything you want to build on that based on some of your observations from the other side?
It's very hard to follow what Bridget has just been saying.
It's so good.
No, not true.
Well, then shifting gears quickly. So obviously, this explosion of video takes infrastructure, and I would be remiss not to talk about the infrastructure supporting just housing all of this video content. Can you guys talk a little bit about innovations like 5G and how broadband is supporting and, so on and so forth? This space I really don't know. So I would love for you to just break it down for the audience, a passive consumer like myself, or somebody who works with brands to create content regularly. Like, what is the infrastructure? What are the implications both in the US and globally?
Yes, so maybe I'll start a little bit. While all the consumer is watching a short video, whether it's on TikTok or whether it's on a website, what they didn't realize, there's so many tech below the scenes, right? So the first of all one is something we call video rendering. Right now, there's a lot of innovation on that, right? So for example, Firework use actually deep learning to render a video, because originally people think about video is big. That's why people don't put video on their own website, because they're going to slow down a website.
Right.
But now with the deep learnings, right? So we're able to see a big file video was able to, compress in a very short file without, sacrificing any resolutions. Well, that's the first thing. The second innovation happened is on hosting, right? Somebody needs to host the videos. Of course, now with the clouds with all the AWS and all the other hosting huge amount of files is not a problem anymore. The third thing, which is more important relating to what Jesse talked about, the 5G, is more streaming, something we call CDN, content delivery networks, right? So now with the 5G coming along, right, what we find is 5G, in particular the telco, when you talk to them, they are wholeheartedly embracing short video than long form, right? Nobody watch Netflix on mobile network. Everybody watch Netflix on Wi-Fi, right? But when you're watching short videos, people consume mobile data. That's what telco wants, right? So now telcos are helping to make it easier to deliver content delivery systems. So anyway, so that's on this side, on the CDN. 5G really propelled that. Right now, what we are seeing is about, some of the publishers that use Firework, they're able to stream about 20 video to 50 video on their site on one page. This is unheard of in the past, but now it's doable and the user can have a seamless experience on that.
It's great. Bridget, do you want to build anything there based on your historical experience?
I think that's the main thing. I mean, I don't know if you guys noted, just even today, T-Mobile came out with, I thought, a little bit of a bizarre announcement that their 5G place-based network will not be able to support Hulu or live video. And of course, I mean, that's a headline grabber, but when you read it, it says, it's a part of technology or something. I think I am going to be 100% in the space I came from, which is the way coaxial was really strung across the United States by independent cable operators. And that technology system is truly, you could argue, got its test the minute the pandemic hit, and it passed with flying colors. I mean, suddenly, overnight, everyone was Zooming, downloading, streaming Netflix 24/7. And for the most part, these infrastructure systems just completely rose to the challenge. And that's the product of the cable industry. I mean, that is what the cable operators in all of these small rural zip code, boundaried, franchised city businesses did. And that's something I believe cable should be really standing up and pounding its chest about. They tend to fly low a little bit in that regard. And they are still an amalgamation of a lot of small independent companies, which people don't realize because they know about Comcast and Charter and Cox and maybe MediaCom. But there are literally, still 1,000 or 2,000 that have fewer than 700 subscribers or fewer than 1,000 subscribers in smaller markets. So you could call those the last line of. It's actually something I'm super, super interested in, the rural broadband phenomenon and how it's affecting education in these very small communities, and how the Federal Communications Commission is or is not going to deal with this and fix this problem. But I think the thing of 5G, becomes this pie in the sky idea, which is, okay, but really it's all the same discussion, which is we care about speed and quality.
Yep.
And access. For me, I mean, that's the rural broadband issue, right? It's speed and quality and access. I don't know that there's going to be that much more. There are going to be limits of what people can actually ingest. Jess, to your point about innovations, I think those will all continue because look at Firework. I mean, things are happening all the time as the technology keeps up. But for individual consumers, I think it still boils down to that idea of speed, clarity, or quality, and then access to it to make sure everyone has it. The digital divide, I think they call it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so 10 minutes left, or 5, whatever we want to call it. Would be remiss to finish this without talking about the evolution of specifically like interactive video, shoppable, clickable, engaged. So Vincent, how does that translate to a market opportunity where consumers are regularly multitasking with mainstream media?
Yes, so it's two things. Number one is, I think Jesse mentioned about the shoppable experience is very real now, and all the consumer are actually expecting the video. I can click, I can interact, I can chat, I can talk to them, while they're doing many other things, right? So that's kind of the very interesting thing. What we are seeing is, so for example, is in Brazil, the GetGlobal, which is a big publisher. What they're doing live stream on their TVs. But also they're saying all the short form version are on their website. So then what we see in the data is as soon as when you're playing the broadcast, let's say the TV show, when the advertising show up, then you start to see a tremendous growth on the website because people now immediately go to the web to browse short form, right? So they're using the short form and a long form all together, right? So anyway, so those are something that, you know, it's actually very interesting to watch things starting to come up.
Yeah. Yeah. Bridget, any thoughts there?
Well, first of all, I love hearing Vincent talk, you know, the globe. I love that. I love hearing about what's happening in other places. No, I think it's just the funny thing again, where dreams being realized or ideas that we were talking about 20 years ago are truly here. And I've given this example before. I will share it quickly here because the show is still very popular and viewed program, Friends, which was NBC's giant 1990s show that was part of their Thursday night must-see TV phenomenon. And at the time, on the cable side of the business, we actually owned a cable network, Shop NBC. And the idea was that people were going to be able to identify, you know, Jennifer Aniston's, Rachel's, you know, sweater and purchase it. We would get it and have it available, and you would jump on this website and then order it. And here we are. I mean, it's taken really from there to now. And it's the swipeable and shoppable, you know, it's the little white dots that show up on the Instagram photo that you can click and see the price of something and purchase it. And that time is really here. So that's what's fun for me to see.
That's great. Okay. So let's summarize our session today. What is the future of video, and for either words or sentences or less? Vincent, you go.
I'll try using a few words. You know, I think the future of videos is going to be immersive. It's going to be mobile first. It's going to be shoppable, interactable, right? And swipeable. Love
it. Bridget?
That's great. Mobile was definitely one of mine. I mean, it's, and for me, truly, because it wasn't always mobile. It just wasn't. And that's really the phenomenon of seeing people born after 1985 or 1990 or 1980, you know, that's a phenomenon. So the future of video definitely, I think, is mobile. I think, I don't know the word, I could say curated, but it's a little bit to my point of, and I'll use again my son as an example of this Formula One. There will be a time, I think, when you sort of can plug in and just, I think of it as a mainline vein, you know, just every data point video about F1 comes straight to his IP address.
Maybe personalized.
Well, yeah, curated, personalized, just that's definitely one of them. And then my other one, or my third, I would say, is this, you know, it's the dopamine hit. It's the kind of always on, which again is a future point for someone like me, because that is just not the case. You know, prime time would end, especially where I grew up, you know, TV would end and it would be snow, which you guys don't even know what that is, but the TV screen would go to black and white snow because the transmission had ended for the day. And that is in the future, that no one will know about that was ever a thing, because it's always this refreshing hitting it, the dopamine hit, it's always on, no matter 24/7 where you're going. So the future of video is also always on. Yeah, and I guess the interactivity of it is the other huge point, which Vincent already mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. This is phenomenal. So it doesn't look like we have questions from the audience, but obviously, audience, please find Bridget and Vincent on LinkedIn, follow them, you can send them messages if you have follow-up questions. But I just want to thank you both. You guys are phenomenal, brilliant, so insightful. And I think anybody who is lucky enough to sit on this panel today got so much out of it. I know I certainly did. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's so nice.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.
That's so nice. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jess. Bye, Vincent.
Take care.
Bye, Jess.
Bye-bye.